Welcome to our video discussion. For today, we are going to talk about Post-Impressionism. It is a predominantly French art movement that developed roughly between 1886 and 1905, which was from the last Impressionist exhibition up to the birth of Fauvism. The movement emerged as a reaction against Impressionism and its concern for the naturalistic depiction of light and color. Post-Impressionists both extended Expressionism while rejecting its limitation. The artists continued using vivid colors, a thick application of paint and real-life subject matter, but were more inclined to emphasize geometric forms, distort forms for an expressive effect, and use of unnatural and seemingly random colors. Due to this broad emphasis on more abstract qualities and symbolic meaning, post-impressionism can encompass sub-movements such as neo-impressionism, symbolism, cloisonnism, and synthesis. The term post-impressionism was first used English artist and critic Roger Fry in 1906 and then again in 1910 when he organized the exhibition Maneth and the Post-Impressionists, which defined it as the development of French art since Manet, a key figure to Impressionist painting. To understand how the movement manifested itself in the art world, here we explore the artists and artworks that defined post-Impressionists.
Mont Saint Victor by Paul Cézanne in 1897. French painter Paul Cézanne is said to be the father of post-impressionism. With his work, he set out to restore a sense of order and structure of painting. And he achieved this by reducing objects to their most basic shapes while retaining the saturated colors of Impressionism. His repetitive and explanatory brushstrokes were typically Cézanne style, and by using planes of color, he was able to build complex fields and detailed studies of his subjects. In this painting of Mont Saint Victor, we see the artist's bold use of color and sporadic brushstroke come together to create a landscape full of depth and energy. In his lifetime, Cézanne's work was often ridiculed by critics who continually compared it to Impressionists' work. Yet his fellow artists saw him as a creative master. His explorations of color and shape inspired other artists like Pablo Picasso and his peer Edgar Degas. Paul Gauguin and Henri Matisse spoke highly of his creative genius. Second, The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh in 1889. Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh is still one of the most famous and influential figures in the history of Western art. The artist strove to be a painter of rural life and nature, and he believed a power existed behind the natural and sought to capture a sense of the magic in his art. This led to aspects of symbolism being present in his paintings, but the artist was careful to stay with what he called the goose of reality and didn't like overly styled works.
Ariaria by Paul Gauguin in 1892. French artist Paul Gauguin remained unappreciated until after his death, but is now celebrated for his experimental use of color and synthesis style that became a feature of some post-impressionist works. Synthesis artists aim to synthesize or to combine three aspects in their works: the outward appearance of natural forms, and the artist's feelings about their subject, and the purity of the aesthetic consideration of line, color, and form. His works combined flat planes of color surrounded by clearly defined lines, and he had a penchant for creating works where dreams and reality coexisted. Towards the end of his life, he spent 10 years in French Polynesia, specifically Tahiti. And this painting, Arya was painted during that time. The work depicts two seated women taking center stage as a dog stands beside them. When it was first exhibited, it was met with sarcasm, although Gauguin regarded it as one of his finest artworks. A Sunday Afternoon on a La Grande Jatte by Georges Seurat in 1884 to 1886. Georges Pierre Seurat was a French painter and draftsman. He is most known for his innovative use of drawing media and devising the technologies known as chromoluminescence, a style of painting which involved the separation of colors into individual dots or patches which interacted optically, and pointillism, a technique in which small distinct dots of color are applied in patterns to form an image. His large-scale work, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte in Surratt's most known piece, and it initiated Neo-Impressionism. Like in Post-Impressionisms, Neo-Impressionists strove to refine the impulsive and intuitive artistic mannerisms of Impressionism, but adopted a rather more scientific approach to capturing light and color. Instead, a disciplined network of dots and blocks of color were painted to convey a sense of organization and permanence to natural landscapes and scenes.
Fifth, The Dream of Henri Rousseau in 1910. In a bid to discover more vivid styles and symbolic content, many post-impressionists were drawn to primitivism. It is an aesthetic idealization that emulates or aspires to create primitive experience. In Western art, primitivism typically has borrowed from non-Western or prehistoric people perceived to be primitive, and it has been important in the development of modern art. The meaning has been interpreted in various ways by artists, but it has come under criticism many times for perpetuating racial stereotypes and exoticizing the is in the work produced. For artist Henry Rousseau, primitivism referred to the naive, self-taught style, and it is an aesthetic because he became famous for. Rousseau once claimed he had no teacher other than nature, and such, his paintings often depicted vivid jungle scenes. Though he never left his native France, in this painting, The Dream, the artist relies on his subconscious rather than the surrounding world to compose this lush scene. Floods, blocks of color are lifted by details and patterns, and his representations of dream-like scenes went to influence Fauvism, which came from after Post-Impressionism, Cubism, and Surrealism. Lastly, the Bonaventure Pine of Paul Signat in 1893. Paul Signat worked with George Seurat to help develop the pointillist style. When Seurat died in 1891, Signat took over the development of Neo-Impressionism and focused primarily on creating landscape paintings and seascapes in vivid bright colors. Like Seurat, he used color to elicit an emotional reaction from the viewer, a key feature of neo-impressionist works. The artist experimented with various media including oil, watercolor, etching, and lithographs. In this image, the Bonaventure pine, Signat uses the pointillist style to create depth and light within the leaves of the tree and rolling hills behind. It's not just the tree Signat portrays, but a light breeze is almost felt by the viewer, though the artist's clever use of shading, color palette, and delicate brushstrokes. There are three characteristics of post-impressionism art. First, brushstroke patterns. Broken colors applied with short brushstrokes were a common technique utilized by post-impressionists. Painters such as Seurat extended this concept even further by employing a technique subsequently called pointillism, which involved precisely placing dots of contrasting colors. Second, unnatural colors. Unlike their predecessors, post-impressionist painters used unnatural colors that captured an emotion or perspective more than an accurate depiction of the subject matter. And lastly, symbolism. By incorporating abstraction and utilizing geometric patterns in novel ways, post-impressionist artists paved the ground of Cubism emerged in the next century. Paul Gauguin contributed to the development of synthesism, a technique for imitating objects from memory using two-dimensional shapes.